Hi, it's been a while since I've made one of these videos, as always. So, lately, one of the things that I've been thinking about, and one of the things that I've been contemplating, is the idea of losing everything in your life. As I'm saying that out loud, I realize how it sounds. Maybe it's very typical of me. Maybe a little bit too typical, but given my circumstances, I think it's pretty appropriate. Of course, I'm not going to share details of my circumstances with the camera, but you're going to have to just take my word for it. So, I've been contemplating the idea of losing everything, because I feel like everybody knows, or at least feels like they can relate to or understand what it would be like to lose everything. No, to lose something in life. Like, everyone's mind has built up this random collection of shit, whether it be people or money or careers or hobbies or possessions, or maybe even like more conceptual things like freedom and privacy and dignity and respect and all of those words. And your brain will have this random collection of things that you care about in your life and things that you value in your life and things that you think are important to you. And everybody understands that, generally speaking, your mind will have a negative emotional reaction to losing any one of these things, in whatever way that might be, like losing somebody that you love, or losing your dream job, or a bunch of money, or even just having things like your freedom and privacy restricted, or having your trust betrayed, or whatever other cliches you want to think about. And everybody understands the emotional pain that you go through when you lose something that you care about. And that emotional pain can come in all kinds of different brands, like anger or sadness, etc., etc. And that's all very normal and basic and understandable. But what was interesting to me was the idea of losing everything. Like, all of the things that you cared about. Every single thing that you valued in your life, in one fell swoop. What would happen to you in terms of your emotional reaction and your psychological reaction if you lost all of it at once? I've been writing short stories lately. I feel like they're a good way for me to express these ideas that I have in my head to myself. It's a good creative outlet, I guess. And one of the characters that I'm writing is supposed to represent this idea of losing everything. So this character that I have in these stories, I thought it would really hit the point across harder if I made them this way. And so I made them a particularly anxious individual, They spend their entire lives through their childhood and their adolescence nervous and scared and worried and paranoid about everything. And they constantly are overthinking everything. And then one day, a big dramatic, tragic event occurs. And when this tragic event occurs, they lose everything. I'm not going to get into the details of what all of those little things were, but like I mentioned before, it's a collection of people and things and concepts that they held dear and considered were valuable. And they lost it all. And I decided to write for this character in his own weird way. This tragic event of losing everything was actually, strangely, a beneficial thing for them, emotionally and psychologically. That they realized all of these things that they loved and cared about and valued in reality enslaved them more than anything else ever could. Because all of the fear and the anxiety and the worry and the stress that everybody goes through, or at least this character, it only exists as a result of the things that you love and care about. I mean, the only reason why you give a shit about anything, or I suppose I should say the only reason why you give a shit about losing anything, is because you have something to lose in the first place. And so, if you lose everything, then that means that you no longer have anything left to lose. Which, as much of a tragedy as that might be to most people, in its own weird way, it might trigger an unexpected emotional and psychological response, which is a sense of freedom in no longer having to worry about losing everything because it's already happened, and no longer having anything left to lose, and therefore having no reason to be anxious or worried or scared about anything that might happen for the rest of your life. I suppose this concept wouldn't necessarily work for a lot of people because most people, at the very least, in the most primal sense, value their own life. And so as long as they're alive, no matter what circumstance they find themselves in, they will always be scared to lose their life. They will always be anxious about their livelihood. So it's of course a situation where it's kind of like each to their own, But I think it was just an expression of this idea that certain individuals under certain circumstances could weirdly find a positive in some kind of big dramatic event in which you lose everything, or at least most of the things that you give a shit about. That there's almost a correlation between the things that you love and the things that you're burdened by. Like everything that you care about in its own way is a burden. It's like an emotional tax that you always have to constantly pay. You're always having to worry and stress about them. Well, maybe you don't have to, but depending on who you are, you might. Anyway, so I know that explaining all of this, it probably sounds like my usual pessimistic, nihilistic bullshit. But I actually feel like, unlike the usual thoughts I have, this at least has like a positive kind of vibe to it, a positive result, even though other people might not interpret it that way. But yeah, that's just one of the things that I've been thinking about. I've been writing about a lot of characters that represent a lot of these different ideas that I have. Another character that I have, I think their entire story is all about. It's all about the contemplation of whether or not life is worth living, taking into account the inevitable pain and misery that comes along with it. Now, this particular individual is going to go through their life, and after a series of events that are unfortunate, he will inevitably come to the conclusion that life is not worth living because of the inevitable pain and misery that comes along with it. But I suppose just like everything else is subjective, you know. It's all relevant on the amount of pain and misery and the type of pain and misery, and also, I guess, how much pain and misery the individual in question is willing to withstand. Each to their own, as I like to say. Well, as you would imagine, this particular character lived a pretty tragic life. So fingers crossed I won't have to go down a similar trajectory and therefore come to a similar conclusion. But, you know, I don't think suicide is so bad. I know that everybody likes to get so dramatic and serious about it. And of course I understand why, you know, there isn't much in this life that invokes negative emotion like death. And that is what suicide is. It's the choice of death. The only thing is, if you watch any of my other videos, then you'll know that I just don't really understand the concept that life is objectively valuable. I understand people that are alive, living their lives, and their minds, as I've already mentioned, generating this collection of random shit that they care about. And in amongst that shit might even be their own existence, and that's fair enough. But this idea that life is objectively valuable just makes no sense to me. Subjectively, sure. But if you want to say that life is subjectively valuable and that it being subjective is... that it being subjective doesn't take away from the truth of it, then you understand the flaw in that concept by me simply saying that subjectively I believe life is not valuable. And it being subjective according to your own principles does not make it any less true. That's a difficulty when it comes to subjectivity. It's like any opinion that you ever have, it doesn't matter how confidently you feel you can argue your point and how logical it may seem to you and how many people you might think you have that agree with you, it's only ever going to be an opinion. And an opinion can never be truth. And if you want to claim that an opinion can be truth, you have to accept the reality that the exact opposite opinion can therefore be just as true as yours. Anyway, going back to suicide. one of the things that I've always thought about is this idea of when I die, whether it be through suicide or any other means, there isn't going to be anything afterwards. Like I'm just going to return to non-existence. Like I was before I was born. That doesn't seem like such a crazy conclusion to come to. I know that the debate of an afterlife or the lack of an afterlife is probably quite a popular one. But the interesting thing is, despite my own personal assumptions about what seems most likely to happen when I die, I actually don't think it even matters. So let's talk about the reasons why suicide is considered such a negative thing. Most people will say suicide isn't bad because of what it does to you, but it's bad because of what it does to the people that love you. That's the cliche, right? But the thing about that is, as much as I understand where people are coming from with that mentality, and if I do a little bit of a thought exercise in my mind, and I think to myself, if I kill myself today, then these people that I have in my life that I will not specify for you, that maybe care about me or love me, they will be heartbroken. They might cry, be depressed, and I might take away happiness from them. Maybe in the most extreme of cases, if any of them happen to be struggling themselves, they might be pushed over the edge and driven to suicide as a result of my own suicide. And I'm not completely psychopathic, unfortunately, so I have the capability of feeling things, and there are people in my life that I care about. And the idea of them crying over me, or being upset about me, or being depressed about me, or killing themselves because of me, it does genuinely upset me. I don't like the idea of that. It makes me upset to think about that being the result of my death. And I suppose you could say, to simplify, I'm scared of killing myself because of the result of my death. But ironically, suicide would be the solution to that fear itself. Because once I die, I'm no longer going to have the capability to be upset or scared about the result of the death that I just induced upon myself. I won't have the capability to regret my decision. I won't be in a position to experience the sadness and grief and negative result of my own death, because I won't exist anymore. So as much as I understand how people can get caught up in the emotional contemplation of what would happen if I committed suicide right now, and people can get caught up in the thought process of my mum crying about it and this person being really upset, and this person might resort to their drug addiction that they just got over, blah 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 blah, our little human dramas. As much as you can get wrapped up in the thought processes of that, once again, ironically, your thought process isn't a thing that's going to exist when you die. You're not going to have the capability to feel bad about it anymore the second that you kill yourself. So it kind of solves its own problem. You know what I mean? Like the worry of how your death will affect other people will actually stop existing and no longer be possible once you die. So killing yourself kind of like solves its own problems, if those are the problems that you think suicide creates. And then even if you wanted to go down the road of being open to the possibility of other versions of the afterlife, like going to heaven or hell, or being in limbo, some kind of infinite afterlife, or maybe even reincarnation, I feel like even under those circumstances and in those scenarios, it still doesn't really matter. Because if I die and I find out, for better or worse, whether it be through heaven or hell, most likely hell, let's be honest, that my soul, whatever the fuck that's supposed to be, my consciousness, my mind is actually eternal and it's infinite, and I'm going to continue to exist, maybe not in a mortal physical sense, but my consciousness, my mind, my ability to think and feel things is going to exist for hundreds of years, thousands of years, millions, billions, trillions of years, an infinite amount of time, more time than I can even comprehend right now. I'm 24 years old. I can't get close to comprehending what it would be like to exist for that amount of time. If I discover that infinity is actually what I am going to be faced with after death, then surely the only logical conclusion I can come to at that point is that nothing matters, even less so than if there is no afterlife. I mean, let's say that the biggest thing that I'm scared of doing is causing emotional pain to the people that love me when I die. Their emotional pain is gonna be absolutely fucking worthless and nothing in the context of there being some kind of eternal afterlife. Let's say I die and I go to heaven. Sure, I might not like the idea of my family and friends and whoever the fuck else might care about me crying about my death, but I've just learned the truth that eternal paradise is what happens when you die. So it doesn't really matter if they're going to cry about me for a while. I now know that they're going to die relatively soon and join me in heaven, and then we're going to spend an eternal amount of time there. And the same goes for hell. If I'm going to go for hell for eternity, I've got bigger things to worry about than a bunch of people crying about my death. I mean, I'm not even going to really entertain the idea of an eternal afterlife because it just doesn't make any sense. At least not within the context of my consciousness being eternal. I think there's lots more kind of like spiritual ideas about what happens when you die, like reincarnation. But none of that makes any sense to me. I mean, if I die and then I'm reincarnated as a toad, how the fuck is that toad in any way me? Like, what part of that toad's existence has me in it? I don't know. I suppose when I think about myself and what myself actually is, I consider myself to be my mind, my thoughts and my feelings. And if that is not going to live on after I die, then as far as I'm concerned, it's not even me. I don't know. It's just like everything else. It's subjective. What you consider to be yourself is down to you. If you want to believe that your life force or some other shit like that lives on, then I guess good for you. And if you want to consider that life force or some other mystical spiritual shit to be what you are more than anything else, and that comforts you, then good for you. But if I'm not actually going to have any capability to be aware consciously in the way that I am right now as I exist as a person, my thoughts, my feelings, if I don't have the capability to be aware of whatever it is that I turn into after I die, then that's not even me. That's a separate entity in whatever form that might be. But like I said, I also feel like the most likely scenario, or what makes the most sense to me, or at least what is easiest for my mind to digest at this point in my life, is that I just stop existing. I am no longer a thing that exists at all. Anyway, my point was supposed to be that no matter what ideas of the afterlife you have, whether they be very traditional and traditional and religious, or a little bit more hippie-ish and spiritual, or very like stereotypically atheist and pessimistic, whatever fucking vibe you're on right now in your life, I don't think any of them have a good enough reason to tell me that I shouldn't kill myself. Like, under none of those circumstances does it really make logical sense that me dying is actually a bad thing, objectively speaking. Do you understand what I'm saying? Anyway, we're about to hit 30 minutes. That's usually a good time for me to stop. I just felt like, I might as well come on here and ramble a bunch. The thing is, I always ramble to myself about these things anyway. I don't even know what the purpose of putting it on camera is. Or, as you already know, I don't think there's really a purpose to anything, but tonight I'm drunk and I decided to film it. Why not? Doesn't make a difference anyway. I don't know when the next video of this type is, when I'm gonna might never make another video like this, who knows. I'm feeling like a bit of a broken record at this point. But yeah, whatever. I'm ending the video now.